I was sitting on my porch in Mobile, Alabama, watching the sunset when my phone rang. My daughter Courtney's voice came through cold and triumphant. "We're leaving tomorrow, Dad. Your beach house is sold." "Bye," she said, laughing. I could hear her husband Trevor snickering in the background. My chest tightened, but I kept my voice calm. "But you forgot one thing," I said quietly. "What do you mean?" she snapped. I smiled into the phone. The house you just sold wasn't actually mine anymore. The silence on the other end was beautiful. Pure, stunned silence. Then Courtney's voice came back sharp and confused. "What are you talking about? I have the deed right here. I signed the papers yesterday. The buyer already paid me." I leaned back in my rocking chair, the one my late wife Sarah and I had picked out 30 years ago at a flea market in Fairhope. The evening breeze came off Mobile Bay, carrying the scent of salt, water, and jasmine. I took my time responding because I wanted Courtney to feel every second of uncertainty. "Well, sweetheart," I said, using the term of endearment that now felt bitter on my tongue. "That's interesting. Because 6 months ago I transferred the actual beach house into a family trust. The property you just sold, that wasn't it." The explosion of rage from Courtney was immediate and volcanic. She started screaming so loud I had to pull the phone away from my ear. Trevor was yelling in the background too, demanding to know what I meant. I waited for the storm to pass, taking a sip of my sweet tea and watching a pelican dive for fish in the bay. When she finally paused for breath, I explained everything calmly. "You remember Christmas 6 months ago when you and Trevor came to visit?" "What about it?" Courtney snapped. "I noticed you going through my filing cabinet in the office. You thought I was napping, but I was watching through the crack in the door. I saw Trevor taking pictures of documents with his phone. I saw you copying down account numbers." Another silence. This one felt heavier, guilty. That's when I knew. I continued. "You weren't visiting your old dad out of love. You were planning something. So I asked myself, what would my darling daughter be after? And the answer was obvious. The beach house. You'd been asking about it constantly. How much it was worth. Whether I had a will. Whether Marcus was in the will. Marcus is my younger son, Courtney's brother. He's a high school history teacher in Birmingham, married with 2 kids, and the most honest person I know. He's never asked me for a dime. So I set a trap," I said. "I went to my attorney, Donald Pritchard, old friend from law school. We created a beautiful little snare just for you." Courtney was breathing hard on the other end. I could picture her face red and twisted with anger. She used to be such a sweet child. Freckles across her nose, always laughing. But that was before Trevor. Before she became someone I barely recognized. I transferred the real beach house, the one on Dolphin Drive, with the private dock and the view of the Gulf, into an irrevocable family trust. Marcus is the primary beneficiary. The trust owns the property. I don't anymore. "That's impossible," Courtney hissed. "I have the deed. The address matches. I verified everything." "Oh, you verified the address," I said, letting some amusement creep into my voice. 327 Beachfront Road. That's what the deed said, right?" "Yes." "Well, darling, there are 2 beachfront roads in Baldwin County. The nice one where my actual beach house sits and another one about 3 miles inland. Used to be called Old Beachfront Road before they changed it in the 90s. Same numbers, different locations. Easy to confuse if you're not careful." I heard her gasp. "You're lying." "Am I? Why don't you drive over there and look at the property you just sold? The one I left that fake deed for in my filing cabinet right where I knew you'd find it. Go ahead. Take a look at your new investment." The property I was talking about was a disaster. I'd bought it 15 years ago as a rental investment, but it turned into a nightmare. Foundation problems from being in a flood zone. Black mold throughout the interior. The county had cited me for code violations twice. The place wasn't worth $50,000 on a good day, and that was being generous. But the deed looked legitimate. Everything was proper legal filed with the county. Except the property was essentially worthless, and Courtney had just sold it to Donald Pritchard for $200,000. "You set me up," Courtney whispered, her voice dropping to something cold and dangerous. "No, sweetheart. I gave you an opportunity to be honest. You chose to forge my signature on legal documents, commit fraud, and steal from your father. I just made sure you stole something that would teach you a lesson. I'll sue you. I'll take everything." "With what money?" "From what I hear, you and Trevor already spent the $200,000. Bought yourself a luxury RV, paid deposits on a 6-month road trip across America. Trevor's been bragging about it on social media. I saw the posts. The sound that came from Courtney then was something between a sob and a scream. Trevor was shouting about lawyers, about how this was entrapment, about how I was a senile old man who didn't know what I was doing. One more thing I said before ending the call. Donald Pritchard, the man who bought that property from you, he's going to discover very soon what you sold him. And when he does, he's going to want his money back. Because you, sweetheart, committed fraud. You forged my signature. You sold property using false documents. That's a felony in Alabama. Several felonies, actually. I hung up then before she could respond. My hands were shaking slightly. Not from fear, but from sadness. This was my daughter. My little girl who used to bring me dandelions she thought were beautiful flowers. Who used to sit on my lap and make me read the same bedtime story 5 times in a row. Where had I gone wrong? But I knew the answer. I'd gone wrong when Sarah died 8 years ago, and I'd retreated into grief instead of being there for my children. I'd gone wrong when I'd let Courtney marry Trevor without saying what I really thought. I'd gone wrong in 1,000 small ways that added up to this moment. My phone rang again. Courtney's number. I didn't answer. She called 6 more times over the next hour. I sat on my porch watching the stars come out over Mobile Bay and let every call go to voicemail. Each message was more desperate than the last, ranging from threats to tears to bargaining. Finally, around midnight, I listened to the voicemails. In the last one, her voice was small and broken. "Daddy, please. We spent the money. The RV alone was $80,000. We put down deposits for campgrounds, for tours, for everything. We can't get it back. What are we going to do?" I deleted the message and went to bed. But sleep didn't come easy. 3 days passed before Donald Pritchard called me. I was in my workshop behind the house, building a bookshelf for Marcus's kids. Woodworking had been my therapy since Sarah died. Something about taking raw lumber and creating something useful, something beautiful, helped quiet the noise in my head. "Apollo," Donald said when I answered his voice, carrying that particular tone lawyers use when they have interesting news. "I just had a conversation with your daughter." "I'm sure that was pleasant," I said, running sandpaper along a piece of oak. "She's in quite a state. She and Trevor are stuck in some motel in Tennessee. Their RV broke down outside Nashville. Transmission failure. Repair costs are running around $12,000. I grunted. Karma works fast. Indeed. But here's where it gets interesting. I called her this morning to discuss the property inspection results. This was the part I'd been waiting for. Donald and I had planned this carefully. He was a real buyer in the transaction, had really paid Courtney $200,000, but he'd done it knowing exactly what he was getting and why. I told her about the foundation cracks, the mold situation, the flood zone designation. I explained that the property has about $47,000 in unpaid utility liens attached to it. I mentioned the county foreclosure notice. How did she take it? About as well as you'd expect. Lots of screaming. But then I told her the real news. I stopped sanding and gave Donald my full attention. I explained that I'm not just a random real estate investor. I told her I'm your attorney and longtime friend, that we'd orchestrated this entire sale specifically to expose her fraud. My stomach tightened. This was the moment of truth. Either Courtney would finally understand the severity of what she'd done, or she'd double down and make everything worse. She went very quiet, Donald continued. Then she asked if this was some kind of joke. I told her it absolutely was not. I laid out every crime she'd committed. Forgery of your signature on the deed transfer. Real estate fraud for misrepresenting the property condition and ownership. Wire fraud because the money transferred electronically. Theft by deception. I have documentation for everything, Apollo, including security camera footage from your home showing her breaking into your office back in December. I'd installed those cameras after the Christmas visit. Tiny things hidden in the smoke detectors and picture frames. I'd hated doing it, hated spying on my own daughter, but I'd needed evidence. What about the recordings, I asked. Those too. Her phone conversations with Trevor about getting your money before you wasted it on some charity or nursing home. Very damning stuff. We'd tapped Courtney's phone legally with a warrant after providing evidence of the initial break-in to local law enforcement. It hadn't been easy to convince me to go that far, but Donald had insisted we needed ironclad proof. So what happens now? I asked. Now I give her a choice. She can face criminal prosecution looking at 5 to 10 years in federal prison, or she can sign an agreement you and I drafted. The agreement was comprehensive. Courtney would have 90 days to return every penny of the $200,000. She'd publicly admit to the family what she'd done. She'd relinquish any and all claims to my estate forever. She'd attend mandatory family counseling. And there'd be a restraining order preventing her from contacting me for 1 year, unless I initiated contact. She's got 24 hours to decide, Donald said. But Apollo, I have to tell you, there's almost no chance she can pay back that money. From what I've learned, Trevor has gambling debts. Serious ones. Most of that $200,000 went to paying off loan sharks, not buying an RV. My workshop suddenly felt very cold. Gambling debts. Apparently, Trevor's been playing high-stakes poker online and in underground games. He's into some dangerous people for close to $300,000. The money from your property sale kept him alive, literally. These aren't the kind of people who accept payment plans. I sat down heavily on my workbench stool. Courtney had no idea. She thought she was married to a successful insurance salesman. She had no clue her husband was a degenerate gambler who'd put both their lives at risk. There's more, Donald said quietly. Trevor's been unemployed for 6 months. Lost his job for missing too many days, probably spending them at casinos. He's been lying to Courtney about going to work. Their joint bank account is overdrawn by $41,000. Credit cards maxed out, most of them in her name. How do you know all this? Private investigator. You authorized it, remember? I had back when this all started. I'd wanted to know exactly who my daughter had become tangled up with. The report had been damning, but I hadn't realized how bad things truly were. So what you're telling me, I said slowly, is that even if Courtney wants to make this right, she can't. She has no way to get that money back. Correct. Which means her only real option is to take the deal and hope you're merciful about the repayment terms. Or face prison. We talked for a few more minutes about logistics, about next steps. After I hung up, I sat in my workshop for a long time, the half-built bookshelf forgotten. Outside, the Alabama summer heat pressed down like a weight. Cicadas sang their endless song. My phone buzzed. A text from Courtney. Please call me. Trevor isn't who I thought he was. I need help. I stared at those words for a long time. Part of me wanted to call her back immediately to be the father who rescued his child from trouble. But another part of me, the part that had learned hard lessons over 70 years of life, knew that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let someone face the full consequences of their choices. I didn't call back. Not yet. A week passed before Courtney showed up in Mobile. I was having breakfast at my kitchen table when I saw her car pull into the driveway. She looked terrible. Hair, unwashed clothes, wrinkled eyes, red and swollen. She sat in the car for several minutes before getting out like she was gathering courage. I didn't go to the door. I waited for her to knock. When she finally did, I opened it but didn't invite her in. We stood there on opposite sides of the threshold, father and daughter strangers. I need to talk to you, she said. I'm listening. Can I come in? No. Her face crumpled a little, but she held it together. Daddy, please. Trevor lied to me about everything. The gambling, the debts, the job. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. But you knew about forging my signature. You knew about stealing from me. I thought I was just getting what would eventually be mine anyway. Trevor said you'd probably leave everything to Marcus, that I needed to be smart, protect myself. So you listened to a con artist instead of trusting your father. Tears started running down her cheeks. I made a mistake. A huge mistake. But I can fix this. I have a plan. That's when I should have closed the door. But I didn't. I wanted to hear what plan she'd concocted, what new scheme she thought would solve this mess. I've been talking to Aunt Patricia, Courtney said, and Uncle George, and some of the cousins. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. What did you tell them? The truth. That you've been acting strange lately, giving away property, making odd financial decisions. I'm worried about you, Daddy. I think you might need help. I understood immediately what she was doing. She was trying to paint me as mentally incompetent. If she could convince enough family members that I was losing my faculties, she could potentially get power of attorney, maybe even have me declared unable to manage my own affairs. It was actually a clever move. Diabolical, but clever. "You're going to try to have me declared incompetent," I said flatly. "I'm trying to protect you." Her voice rose, taking on a hysterical edge. "Marcus has been manipulating you. He wants all your money for himself. Can't you see that your own son is taking advantage of you?" This was a new low. Trying to turn me against Marcus, who'd never asked for anything, who visited every Sunday just to check on me, who brought his kids by to brighten my days. "Get off my property," I said quietly. "Daddy, please listen. You have 5 seconds before I call the police." She stared at me, and for a moment I saw hatred flash across her face. Pure, undiluted hatred. Then she turned and ran back to her car tires, squealing as she pulled out of my driveway. I immediately called Marcus. "Your sister is trying something new. Thought you should know." Over the next 3 days, I got calls from Aunt Patricia, Uncle George, and my cousin Diane. Each conversation followed the same pattern. They were concerned. Courtney had visited them with worrying stories. Was I feeling okay? Was Marcus pressuring me about my estate? Had I considered seeing a doctor? I handled each call the same way. I calmly explained that I was in perfect health, both physical and mental. I told them about Courtney's fraud. Most of them didn't believe me at first, so I offered to send them documentation. Most declined, not wanting to get involved in family drama. But Aunt Patricia agreed to a meeting. She was Sarah's sister, had always been close to our family. She suggested we all get together to talk things through. That's how I found myself the following Saturday, walking into Aunt Patricia's house in Daphne to find an ambush waiting. 10 family members sat in her living room. Courtney stood at the front like a prosecutor, a folder of papers in her hands. Trevor lurked in the corner looking smug, and standing next to Courtney was a man in a white coat I'd never seen before. "Uncle Apollo," Diane said, her voice dripping with false concern. "We're all here because we love you. We're worried." This was an intervention. Not the kind where family tries to help an addict. The kind where they try to take control of someone's life. "Courtney's been telling us about some concerning behaviors," Uncle George said. He was 73, retired military, usually sharp as a tack. But he was also loyal to family, sometimes blindly so. Courtney stepped forward. "Daddy, this is Dr. Kenneth Phillips. He's a geriatric care specialist. We'd like him to evaluate you just to make sure everything's okay." I looked at the man in the white coat. Something about him seemed off. Too smooth, too rehearsed. "Dr. Phillips, where did you get your degree?" He smiled, showing too many teeth. "Johns Hopkins. I've been practicing geriatric care for 12 years. What's your medical license number?" The smile faltered slightly. "I don't recall off the top of my head." "What about your DEA number?" "Mr. Apollo, I don't think that's relevant too." "It's relevant because I don't think you're a real doctor at all." The room went silent. Courtney's face went white, then red. "Daddy, you're being paranoid." "See, this is exactly what we're talking about." "Everyone," I said, standing up and reaching into my pocket. "I've been recording this entire conversation. Alabama is a one-party consent state, which means this recording is completely legal. What you've just witnessed is attempted elder abuse, conspiracy to commit fraud, and several other crimes." I pulled out my phone and held it up. The recording app was clearly visible, running the whole time. Then I walked to the front door and opened it. Donald Pritchard walked in, briefcase in hand. Behind him was Dr. Raymond Hayes, my actual physician for the past 20 years. "Dr. Hayes," I said, "would you mind telling everyone about my recent physical exam?" Dr. Hayes, a dignified black man in his 60s, smiled gently. "Apollo is in excellent health. His cognitive functions are sharp, his memory is clear, and he shows no signs of dementia, Alzheimer's, or any other mental impairment. In fact, for a 70-year-old man, he's remarkably fit." I turned to the fake doctor. "Now, Dr. Phillips, let's talk about who you really are." "Donald, would you do the honors?" Donald opened his briefcase and pulled out a file. "Kenneth Phillips is actually Kenneth Chambers, Trevor's college roommate. He's not a medical doctor. He's never attended Johns Hopkins. He's a used car salesman from Pensacola with 2 DUIs and a record of petty fraud. The man tried to run, but Uncle George, despite his age, moved fast. He blocked the door, his Marine training evident in his stance. "Sit down," George growled. Kenneth sat. Donald continued laying out documentation on Aunt Patricia's coffee table. Bank statements showing Courtney's theft. Security footage showing her breaking into my house. Text messages between her and Trevor, planning to get the old man's money. The forged documents with expert analysis proving forgery. Everything laid out in clear, undeniable detail. Aunt Patricia started crying. "Oh, Courtney, what have you done?" Cousin Diane tried to defend her. "This is all circumstantial. It's a misunderstanding. Apollo is twisting things to make Courtney look bad because he wants to leave everything to Marcus." "Actually," Marcus said, speaking for the first time from where he'd been sitting quietly in the corner, "I don't want anything. I've tried to tell Dad that multiple times. I'm comfortable. I have a good job, a happy family. I never asked for an inheritance." "Of course you'd say that," Diane spat. "You're in on this scheme." Marcus just looked sad. "Courtney came to me last week. She offered to provide false testimony that I abused her when we were children. She said if I'd help her get Dad declared incompetent, she'd give me 10% of the estate. When I refused and told her I was recording our conversation, she threatened to destroy my teaching career with false allegations." He pulled out his own phone, pressed play. Courtney's voice filled the room clear as crystal, offering the deal, making threats, revealing the blackmail plan. The room exploded. Aunt Patricia was sobbing. Uncle George was shouting at Courtney. Diane tried to leave but found Donald blocking her way. "No one's leaving yet," Donald said calmly. "Mr. Apollo has graciously agreed not to press charges against those who were simply misled. But Courtney and Trevor, along with their friend Kenneth here, are facing serious consequences. Attempted elder abuse, fraud, extortion, impersonation of a medical professional. This isn't going away." Trevor bolted, then shoving past people making it to the door. But George's son, Tyler, a young guy who worked construction, caught him by the collar and hauled him back. "Stay put," Tyler said. It wasn't a request. Courtney collapsed onto Aunt Patricia's couch, her whole body shaking. "I didn't mean for it to go this far. I just wanted what was mine. I just wanted Dad to see me, to appreciate me." Trevor said this was the only way. "Trevor said," I repeated quietly. Trevor said, "Do you hear yourself, Courtney? You let that man turn you into a criminal. You've committed felonies. You've tried to destroy your brother's life. You've broken your father's heart. And you still blame someone else." She looked up at me then, and for a brief moment I saw the daughter I'd lost. The real Courtney buried under layers of greed and desperation and poor choices. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I know you are. Sorry you got caught." Donald was on his phone with the police. They'd be here soon. The fake doctor was sweating, Trevor was cursing, and my family was in tatters. I walked out of Aunt Patricia's house and sat in my truck, suddenly exhausted. This wasn't victory. This was devastation. My daughter was going to prison. My family was broken. And somewhere my late wife Sarah was watching all this, her heart breaking all over again. The police arrested all three of them. Courtney, Trevor, and Kenneth were taken away in separate patrol cars while the family watched from Aunt Patricia's front yard. It was the saddest parade I'd ever witnessed. But the nightmare was just beginning. 2 weeks after the arrests, Donald called me with news that made everything exponentially worse. "Apollo, you need to sit down for this." I was already sitting in my workshop trying and failing to focus on the bookshelf that still wasn't finished. I'm sitting. What now? Federal marshals showed up at Courtney and Trevor's apartment this morning. They seized everything. Furniture, electronics, Trevor's car. The landlord is evicting them. And the IRS has opened an investigation. The IRS. Trevor never paid taxes on his gambling winnings. And there were winnings, substantial ones, before his luck turned. We're looking at $85,000 in back taxes plus penalties and interest. Courtney's liable because they filed jointly. I closed my eyes. How much does Trevor actually owe to these loan sharks you mentioned? Best estimate $275,000. He's been playing in underground poker games, borrowing from organized crime figures. These aren't the kind of people who send collection letters, Apollo. They send enforcers. Is Courtney in danger? Probably. Trevor gave them her name when he couldn't pay. Used her as collateral, essentially. Said she was about to inherit money, that they could count on her for payment. My daughter was in jail facing fraud charges, and she was also on the hook to mobsters for $250,000. How could things possibly get worse? I found out 3 days later when Courtney was released on bail. Aunt Patricia had posted bond mortgaging her own house to do it. When I found out, I drove to Patricia's house to tell her she was making a mistake. "She's Sarah's daughter," Patricia said simply. Sarah would have wanted someone to help her. Sarah would have wanted her to face consequences and learn from them, maybe. But Sarah isn't here and I am. I can't just abandon her. Courtney was staying in Patricia's spare room, and she looked like she'd aged 10 years in 2 weeks. Her hair had started showing gray. She'd lost weight she couldn't afford to lose. When she saw me, she started to speak, but I held up my hand. "I'm not here to see you. I'm here to tell Aunt Patricia that you're manipulating her." "I'm not Courtney," said her voice hollow. "I have nowhere else to go. Trevor filed for divorce. He's claiming I forced him to participate in the fraud, that I manipulated him. He's trying to make himself the victim. Maybe he learned from the best." She flinched like I'd slapped her. "The gambling debts are real." 2 men came to the apartment. They showed me pictures of what they do to people who don't pay. "Daddy, I'm terrified." For the first time since this all started, I saw genuine fear in her eyes. Not anger, not calculation, just pure terror. "How much of the 200,000 is left?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Nothing. It's all gone. Trevor spent it all. The RV we bought was repossessed. We never even got to take the trip. He gambled away the rest trying to win back what he'd already lost." "Your job. Fired." They saw the news about the arrest. Corporate policy, no employees with pending felony charges. I looked at Patricia, saw the sympathy in her eyes, and knew I was losing this battle. My sister-in-law had the softest heart in Baldwin County. She'd mortgage her house, drain her savings, destroy her own financial security trying to save Courtney. "Patricia," I said gently, "can you give us a moment?" She hesitated, then left the room. Courtney and I sat in silence for a long time. "You tried to have me declared incompetent," I finally said. "You tried to destroy Marcus's reputation. You forged my signature, stole from me, and when you got caught, you tried to manipulate the entire family against me. Why would I help you now?" "You shouldn't," she said. "I don't deserve help. But I'm asking anyway because I don't know what else to do. These people Trevor owes money to don't care about divorce or jail or anything else. They want their money, and they think I have it. Do they know where you are?" She nodded. "One of them followed me here. Black SUV, tinted windows. He's been parked down the street for 2 days. I looked out Patricia's front window. Sure enough, there was a black Escalade 3 houses down. As I watched, a man in a dark suit got out, lit a cigarette, and stared directly at Patricia's house. "They're waiting," Courtney whispered. "Waiting for me to go somewhere alone, or for Aunt Patricia to go to work. I think they're planning to force me to call you to beg you for money while they listen." My hands clenched into fists. Whatever Courtney had done, she didn't deserve this. No one did. "I'll handle it," I said, standing up. "How?" "That's not your concern. You stay here, don't leave Patricia's house, and don't open the door for anyone but family." I walked outside before she could respond. The man by the Escalade watched me approach. He was big, probably 6'4", with a neck like a tree trunk, and hands that looked like they'd broken plenty of bones. "Help you with something, old man?" he asked. "I'm Apollo Jenkins, the girl's father." He smiled, showing gold teeth. "Then you're exactly who we need to talk to. Not here. Not near my family. You want to talk, we'll talk at my place. Alone." He considered this, then nodded. "Lead the way." I drove home with the Escalade following. My heart was hammering, but my hands were steady on the wheel. I'd faced worse than hired muscle in my 70 years. Not much worse, maybe, but worse nonetheless. At my house, the man followed me inside. I offered him coffee, which seemed to surprise him. "You're not scared," he observed. "Terrified, actually. But fear and courage aren't opposites. You can be both." He laughed, a genuine sound. "I like you, old man. Shame about your daughter. How much does she owe?" $275 plus interest. Call it 300 even. That's more money than I have liquid. Then you better find it. Because if you don't, we start taking payment in other ways. Understanding what I'm saying, I understood perfectly. They'd hurt Courtney. Probably kill her if the debt wasn't settled. I need time. You got 2 weeks. After that, we start collecting. He left, and I sat in my kitchen for a long time trying to figure out how I'd gotten here. My daughter was a criminal in debt to mobsters, and I was her only hope of survival. The beach house in the trust was worth close to $450,000. I could liquidate assets, sell property, drain my retirement, or I could let Courtney face the full consequence of the choices she and Trevor had made. I picked up my phone and called Marcus. "Son, I need your advice on something." We talked for 2 hours. At the end, Marcus said something that stuck with me. "Dad, you can save her from this. But if you do, will you be saving her or just postponing the next disaster?" That night, I didn't sleep at all. The deadline from the mobsters was ticking down. I had 12 days left when Courtney did something so desperate, so dangerous, that it nearly destroyed what little was left of our relationship. I'd started taking morning walks along the pier near my real beach house. It was part of my routine, had been for years. Every morning at 6, I'd walk the length of the pier, watch the sunrise, sometimes fish a little. It cleared my head, helped me think. On the 9th day before the deadline, I noticed Courtney's car in the parking lot. That was odd. She was supposed to be staying at Patricia's house under virtual house arrest since the threats from Trevor's creditors. I continued my walk but kept my guard up. Something felt wrong. Halfway down the pier, Courtney appeared from behind the bait shop. She looked wild hair, tangled eyes, red-rimmed from lack of sleep. "Daddy," she said, walking toward me. "We need to talk. How did you know I'd be here? I've been watching you for 3 days. I know your routine." A chill ran down my spine. "You've been stalking me. I've been trying to find a time to talk when no one else is around. Please, I need help. Those men are getting impatient. They came to Aunt Patricia's house again. They threatened her, said they'd burn her house down if I didn't produce money." We were near the end of the pier now, where the water was deep and dark beneath us. The sun was just starting to rise, painting the sky pink and gold. It should have been beautiful, but all I felt was a growing sense of danger. "I don't have $300,000 to give you," I said carefully. "Not without destroying my own financial security. Then we'll figure something else out. Together. You're smart, Daddy. You always find a way." She was moving closer, maneuvering around me in a way that put my back to the railing. I realized with sudden terrible clarity what she was planning. "Courtney, what are you doing?" "If you were gone," she said, her voice strange and distant, "your estate would settle quickly. Marcus would get the trust, but there's life insurance. Policy's worth $500,000. I'm still listed as a beneficiary, aren't I? You're talking about killing me." I said it flatly, wanting to hear how it sounded out loud. "I'm talking about survival. Those men will kill me, Daddy. They'll torture me first, then kill me. But if you were to have an accident, slip and fall off this pier, hit your head, drown in the bay, then I'd have the money to pay them off. No one would suspect anything. You're 70. Accidents happen to old men all the time." She was right in front of me now, hands reaching toward my chest. I could see the calculation in her eyes the moment she was preparing to push. But I was ready. "Thomas," I said calmly, "you can come out now." Thomas Wright emerged from behind the bait shop where he'd been hiding. He was a retired police officer I'd hired as private security after the threats started. He'd been following me on morning walks for a week, staying out of sight just in case. And he'd been recording everything on his phone. Courtney spun around, saw Thomas, saw the phone, and understood immediately that she'd been caught. Again. But worse than Thomas, 3 more people stepped onto the pier. Donald Pritchard, a uniformed police officer, and a woman with a camera who'd been documenting everything from a boat 30 yards offshore. "No," Courtney whispered. No. "You just attempted assault," the police officer said, walking forward with handcuffs ready. "Possibly attempted murder. We have video evidence, audio recording, and multiple witnesses." Courtney's legs gave out. She collapsed onto the pier, sobbing hysterically. I wasn't going to do it. I was just trying to scare him into helping me. I wasn't really going to push him. "You maneuvered him to the edge of the pier," Thomas said quietly. "Your body language showed clear intent. I've seen it 100 times in my career. You were absolutely going to push him." The police officer was reading Courtney her rights as she put on the handcuffs. I stood there, my back still against the railing, watching my daughter be arrested for trying to murder me. "Why?" I asked her, my voice breaking for the first time. "Why, Courtney? How did you become this person?" She looked up at me, and for just a second I saw something human break through the desperation. "I don't know, Daddy. I don't know. When Mama died, something inside me broke too. And then Trevor got his hooks in me, and the gambling and the debts, and everything just spiraled. I kept making worse choices, and each choice made the next one easier. Until I was standing here about to kill my own father. She was taken away in the police car. I watched until it disappeared from sight, then sat down heavily on a pier bench. My legs were shaking. My whole body was shaking. "You okay?" Apollo Thomas asked, sitting beside me. "No, not even a little bit." Donald joined us, looking grim. "This changes everything. Attempted murder, stalking, violating her bail conditions. She's not getting out this time. Judge Reynolds will deny bail. Courtney's going to prison, probably for a very long time." "How long?" "With the fraud charges, the forgery, the attempted elder abuse, and now this 20 years minimum. Possibly life if the prosecutor pushes for it." I thought about that. 20 years. Courtney would be almost 60 when she got out. Her life effectively over. "There's something else," Donald said. "While investigating Courtney, we discovered that Trevor's been in contact with her from jail. He's been orchestrating this whole thing. The stalking, the pressure from the mobsters, everything. He convinced Courtney that killing you was her only option. Trevor orchestrated his own wife trying to murder me. He figured if you died, Courtney would inherit enough to pay his debts. He'd get out of jail, eventually find her, and they'd split whatever was left. It was his plan from the beginning." I started laughing then, not because anything was funny, but because the alternative was to cry. My daughter had become a puppet for a sociopath. She'd lost herself so completely that she'd been willing to commit patricide based on the schemes of a man who'd only ever seen her as a means to an end. "I want to see her," I said. "In jail. Before the arraignment." "Apollo, I don't think that's a good idea." "I don't care what you think. She's still my daughter. I need to look her in the eye one more time." That afternoon, I sat in a visitation room at the Mobile County Jail. Courtney was brought in wearing orange scrubs, hands cuffed, looking smaller and more fragile than I'd ever seen her. We sat on opposite sides of a table, a guard standing nearby. "I'm sorry," she said immediately. "I'm so sorry, Daddy. Not sorry I got caught. Sorry for what I became, for what I almost did." "Why did you listen to Trevor?" "Because he made me feel valued. After Mama died and you shut down, I felt invisible. Marcus had his teaching career, his wife, his kids. You had your grief. I had nothing. Then Trevor showed up and told me I was special, that I deserved more, that the world owed me something. And I believed him. You were always special, Courtney. You were always valued. You just couldn't see it. I see it now. Too late, but I see it." We sat in silence for a moment. Then I said the words I'd been holding back for weeks. "I'm not going to save you from this. I could probably hire expensive lawyers, maybe get your sentence reduced. But I'm not going to do that. You need to face the full consequences of your choices. It's the only way you'll ever find yourself again." She nodded slowly. "I know. I understand. Can I ask you one thing, though?" "What?" "Will you come visit me in prison? Not right away, maybe. But someday. I don't want to lose you completely." I thought about Sarah, about what she would want me to do. "I'll think about it. But Courtney, I can't promise anything. That's more than I deserve." I left the jail and drove home through gathering darkness. My phone rang. It was Marcus. "Dad, I heard what happened. Are you okay?" "No, but I will be. Eventually. Do you want me to come down?" "Not yet. But Marcus, thank you. For being the son who didn't need saving. I love you, Dad. I love you too, son." That night, I finally finished the bookshelf. It was 3 a.m. when I drove it to Marcus's house in Birmingham and left it on his porch with a note. "For the grandkids. Love, Dad." I drove home as the sun rose, and for the first time in months, I felt something like peace. 2 months later, I sat in a federal courtroom, watching my daughter face justice. The gallery was packed with family reporters and curious onlookers. Courtney sat at the defense table next to her public defender, a young woman named Amanda Morrison, who looked overworked and underpaid. The charges were read: multiple counts of fraud, forgery, attempted murder, extortion, violation of bail conditions. The evidence was presented: documents, recordings, testimony, video footage from the pier. It was overwhelming, damning, irrefutable. Trevor had already taken a plea deal, agreed to testify against Courtney in exchange for a reduced sentence. Watching him on the stand, describing how he'd manipulated her, how he'd convinced her that killing me was the only solution, I felt something between disgust and pity. When the prosecution rested, Amanda Morrison stood to present the defense. It was thin, mostly character witnesses who hadn't seen Courtney in years and didn't know what she'd become. Aunt Patricia testified through tears, talking about the sweet girl Courtney had been before life broke her. Then something unexpected happened. "Your Honor," Amanda said, "I'd like to call Apollo Jenkins to the stand." My lawyer Donald jumped up. "Objection, Mr. Jenkins is the victim in this case." Actually, the judge, a stern woman named Martha Reynolds, said victims are allowed to give impact statements. "I'll allow it." I walked to the witness stand, was sworn in, and sat down facing the entire courtroom. Courtney wouldn't look at me. She stared at the table, tears running down her face. "Mr. Jenkins," Amanda said, "can you tell the court about your daughter?" I took a breath. This wasn't what I'd expected. "What do you want to know?" "Tell us about Courtney before all this happened. Before the fraud, before Trevor. Tell us who she really is." So, I did. I talked about the little girl who used to bring me wildflowers, the teenager who volunteered at the animal shelter every weekend, the young woman who'd stayed by her mother's bedside during those final terrible weeks of cancer, reading to Sarah when she was too weak to hold a book herself. I talked about how Sarah's death had broken something in Courtney, how I'd failed her by retreating into my own grief instead of being there for my children, how Marcus had his own family to anchor him, but Courtney had been alone and vulnerable when Trevor entered her life. "And when you discovered what she'd done," Amanda asked, "when you realized she'd forged your signature and committed fraud, why did you set such an elaborate trap? Why not just report her to the police?" "Because I thought if I exposed her schemes in a controlled way, she'd realize how far she'd fallen. I thought maybe she'd wake up and see what she'd become. I thought I could save her from herself. And when she tried to hurt you on that pier, I think she was desperate and terrified. I don't think my daughter is a killer. I think she's a lost person who made increasingly terrible decisions." The prosecutor objected, argued I was making excuses for an attempted murderer. Judge Reynolds overruled him and asked me to continue. "What would you like to see happen to your daughter, Mr. Jenkins?" This was the moment. I'd been thinking about this question for 2 months, lying awake at night, wrestling with competing desires for justice and mercy. "I want her to face consequences," I said slowly. "Real consequences, because without them she'll never change. But I also want her to have a chance at redemption, at becoming the person she used to be." I explained the idea I'd been developing with Donald, a specialized rehabilitation program that focused on intensive therapy, addiction treatment. Courtney had developed a pill addiction I hadn't even known about, and restorative justice. 2 years in a secure residential facility, followed by years of supervised probation, community service, and ongoing counseling. "But Your Honor," I said, looking directly at Judge Reynolds, "I want to be clear. This isn't about avoiding punishment. It's about meaningful rehabilitation. If the court agrees to this plan and Courtney violates any part of it, she should face the full prison sentence with no possibility of reconsideration." The prosecutor was livid, argued that wealthy defendants couldn't buy their way out of consequences. But I wasn't wealthy, not really. The rehabilitation program would cost everything I had. I'd have to sell property, liquidate investments, drain my retirement. I'd probably have to move into a smaller house. Judge Reynolds called a recess. The courtroom erupted in whispers and arguments. Donald pulled me aside. "Apollo, you're giving her another chance. After everything she's done, I'm giving her the only chance she's got. If she throws it away, that's on her. But I have to try. Sarah would want me to try." When court resumed, Judge Reynolds looked exhausted. "This is an unusual case. The crimes are serious, the harm is real. But I'm also cognizant that this defendant was influenced by a manipulative spouse dealing with untreated mental health issues and addiction, and that the victim, her own father, is advocating for a restorative approach." She detailed the terms. 2 years in a secure rehabilitation facility that looked more like prison than therapy. Intensive daily counseling. Complete financial transparency. Monthly court check-ins. 5 years of supervised probation after release. Any violation of any term would result in immediate incarceration for 7 years, with no possibility of early release. "Miss Courtney Jenkins," the judge said, "you have 24 hours to decide. This offer will not be extended twice." Court was adjourned. I didn't try to talk to Courtney as she was led away. Marcus caught up with me in the hallway. "Dad, this is going to cost you everything." "I know. She might waste this chance. I know that too. But you're doing it anyway. Your mother asked me right before she died to never give up on our children. Either of them. even if they lost their way. She made me promise. This is me keeping that promise. That night, Courtney called from the jail. She'd been given a phone privilege to discuss the offer with family. Why, she asked me. Why would you do this after everything I've done to you? Because you're still my daughter. And because somewhere inside the person you've become, there's still the girl who used to sit on my lap and make me read the same story 5 times. I'm betting everything I have that she's still in there. What if she's not? What if I'm too broken to fix? Then you'll go to prison, and I'll have lost everything trying. But at least I'll know I tried. She was quiet for a long time. Then I accept. I'll do the program. I'll do everything the judge said. And Daddy, thank you. I'll spend the rest of my life trying to deserve this. Don't thank me yet. The work ahead of you is harder than anything you've ever done. You're going to have to face everything you've become, everything you've done. It's going to hurt. Good. I deserve to hurt. The next morning, Courtney accepted the judge's offer in court. She was remanded to the Clearwater Rehabilitation Center in northern Alabama, a secure facility that specialized in treating people who'd committed crimes while struggling with addiction and mental health issues. I drove home alone, my bank accounts empty, my retirement depleted, but my conscience clear. 2 years passed. I downsized to a smaller house, sold some property, simplified my life considerably. The beach house stayed in the trust for Marcus, but I visited it occasionally, keeping it maintained, watching sunrises from that same pier where my daughter had once tried to hurt me. Marcus and his family visited every Sunday. My grandchildren grew taller, smarter, funnier. Life went on, smaller but somehow fuller. I received monthly reports from Clearwater about Courtney's progress. The first 6 months were rough. She went through withdrawal from pills I hadn't known she was taking. She raged, cried, refused therapy, tried to manipulate staff. But the program didn't bend, and eventually neither did she. Slowly, session by session, she started unpacking 38 years of pain, grief, and poor choices. She wrote me letters. At first I didn't read them, but eventually I did. They were raw, honest, taking accountability in ways she'd never done before. In her 12th month, she was allowed visitors. Marcus went first, came back saying she seemed different, quieter, more genuine. I waited another 3 months before driving up to Clearwater myself. The facility looked more like a small college campus than a prison or hospital. Courtney met me in a visitor's garden, looking healthy for the first time in years. Her hair was its natural color, no makeup, eyes clear. We sat on a bench among flowering dogwoods, and for a long time we just looked at each other. "Hi, Daddy," she finally said. "Hi, sweetheart. I've been doing a lot of work on myself. Real work, not just going through motions. I can see that. I wrote you 87 letters. Did you read them all?" "Every single one." "Then you know how sorry I am. Not just for getting caught, but for becoming someone who could do those things. For losing myself so completely that I almost killed my own father." I nodded. "What have you learned?" She thought about that. "I learned that grief, when you don't deal with it, turns into something toxic. When Mama died, I was so angry. Angry at God, at cancer, at you for shutting down, at myself for not saving her somehow. I never processed that anger, just buried it. Trevor saw that buried rage and exploited it. What else? That I have value that isn't tied to money or success or proving anything to anyone. That I spent so many years trying to be impressive that I forgot to just be good. That my real worth was in being Sarah's daughter, Marcus's sister, your child. But I couldn't see it. We talked for 3 hours. She told me about her therapy, about facing her addiction, about learning to sit with uncomfortable emotions instead of running from them. About making amends to people she'd hurt, including a long letter to Aunt Patricia, apologizing for manipulating her kindness. When it was time for me to leave, she hugged me. Really hugged me the way she used to when she was small. "I'm going to make you proud," she said. "It might take the rest of my life, but I will. You already have. By doing the work. By being honest. That's enough." 6 months later, Courtney completed her 2-year program. She moved into a supervised halfway house, got a job at a non-profit helping other women in recovery, started attending community college online. Once a week, she met with Judge Reynolds to report on her progress. One warm spring morning, almost 3 years after everything fell apart, she showed up at my house unannounced. I was on my porch drinking coffee, watching the Mobile Bay sunrise. "Can we talk?" she asked, nervously. "Of course." She sat in Sarah's old rocking chair. I've been thinking a lot about the beach house, the real one in the trust. What about it? I understand now why you put it in a trust for Marcus. I understand why you couldn't just give it to me, but I was wondering if maybe someday, when I've proven myself, we could all share it. Make it a family place again like it was when Mama was alive. I smiled. Actually, I've been meaning to talk to Marcus about that. I've been updating the trust terms. The house stays in trust, but it's for both of you now. Equal shares, with one condition. What condition? That you use it the way your mother wanted. For family gatherings. For keeping us connected. Every summer mandatory family week at the beach house. You, Marcus, his family eventually. Your family if you build one. The house isn't an asset to be sold or fought over. It's a place to remember what matters. Tears rolled down her face. I don't deserve that. No, you don't. None of us deserve most of the grace we receive in life. But that's what grace is. We drove to the beach house together that afternoon. Marcus met us there with his wife and kids. We walked the pier where everything had nearly ended, but this time it was different. This time we were together. I showed them both the inside of the house, preserved exactly as Sarah had left it. Her books still on the shelves, her collection of sea glass still in jars on the windowsill, her handwriting on a grocery list still stuck to the refrigerator. This is why I fought so hard to protect it, I said. Not because of its monetary value, because this place holds every good memory we have as a family. Every summer vacation, every Christmas gathering, every ordinary Sunday afternoon when we were all together. This house is our history. I pulled out 2 envelopes from my pocket. Letters Sarah had written to Courtney and Marcus before she died. Letters she'd asked me to give them when the time was right. Your mother knew she wasn't going to beat the cancer. She spent her last weeks writing letters, recording videos, leaving messages for the future. She had a lot to say to both of you. They read their letters privately on opposite ends of the pier. Both came back red-eyed and quiet. We scattered the last of Sarah's ashes in the Gulf, watching the current carry them out to sea. That evening, we cooked dinner together in the beach house kitchen. Courtney and Marcus's wife made Sarah's famous jambalaya. The kids played on the beach. The sun set in spectacular colors over the water. This is what Mama wanted, Marcus said, looking around at all of us together. This exact thing. I think she'd be happy, Courtney added quietly. Not with everything I did to get here, but with where we ended up. I looked at my children, my grandchildren, the house full of life and laughter again, and felt Sarah's presence as clearly as if she were standing beside me. You know what I learned through all this, I said. Family isn't about money or property or who gets what when someone dies. It's about showing up. It's about forgiveness without forgetting. It's about loving someone enough to let them face consequences and loving them through the consequences too. Courtney nodded. I learned that sometimes the people who love you most are the ones who don't save you from yourself. They let you fall so you can learn to stand up again. And sometimes, Marcus added, the most valuable inheritance isn't what you leave behind, but what you teach people while you're still here. We stayed at the beach house that whole weekend. The first of what would become an annual tradition, a week each summer where the family gathered to remember to reconnect, to be together. I'm 73 now. My hair is white, my joints creak, and I move slower than I used to. But I'm surrounded by family. Courtney just finished her community college degree and is applying to become a licensed counselor herself, wanting to help others who've lost their way like she did. Marcus was named Teacher of the Year at his school. My grandchildren are growing up knowing their grandmother's story, understanding that people can lose themselves and find their way back. The beach house stands as it always has, a testament to what matters. Not its dollar value, but its worth, as a gathering place, as a keeper of memories, as proof that families can break and heal again. Sometimes people ask me if I regret how I handled everything with Courtney. If I wish I'd just reported her to the police, immediately saved myself the heartache and the money and the drama. I tell them no. Because sometimes the hardest thing a parent does isn't protecting their children from the world. It's protecting them from themselves. My daughter didn't need my money. She needed to remember who she really was. And sometimes that takes losing everything to find what truly matters. Every father fears he'll fail his children somehow. Every parent worries they're not doing enough, or doing too much, or doing it all wrong. But here's what I've learned. The measure of a father isn't whether his children never fall. It's whether he's still there, hand outstretched, when they're ready to stand up again. Sarah knew that. She told me before she died, our babies are going to hurt in this world. We can't stop that, but we can make sure they know we're always home, always waiting, always ready to love them back to themselves. She was right, as she usually was. So here I sit on my porch overlooking Mobile Bay, watching another sunset paint the sky. Tomorrow, Marcus and his family are coming for dinner. Next week, Courtney is bringing a man she's been seeing, someone from her recovery community who understands the work of rebuilding a life. And next month, we'll all gather at the beach house for our annual week together. The house my daughter tried to sell, the one she thought would solve all her problems, ended up saving us all in ways none of us expected. Not because of what it was worth, but because of what it represented. Home, family, second chances, grace we don't deserve but receive anyway. That's the real inheritance I'm leaving my children. Not property or money or things, but the knowledge that family means you always have a place to come back to. That love means holding people accountable and forgiving them anyway. That the most valuable things in life can't be sold, stolen, or forged on a deed. They can only be lived day by day, choice by choice together. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice between justice and mercy with someone you love? Have you faced a situation where protecting someone meant letting them face hard consequences? What would you have done in my position? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one, and your perspectives help others who might be facing similar struggles. If this story touched you or made you think about your own family relationships differently, please hit that like button. Subscribe to hear more stories about real life, real struggles, and real redemption. And share this with someone who might need to hear that it's possible to lose your way and still find your way home. Thank you for listening to my story. May you find the wisdom to know when to hold on and when to let go, and may your family always be your sanctuary, not your battlefield. Until next time, this is Apollo reminding you that the most valuable things in life aren't things at all.